Hi. Last week I was asked on my blog post about how a general ledger budget can be compared to actual numbers. And they had used some examples I did on creating smart list objects using both the designer and using the smart list E1 builder. And they were still running into some problems with duplications and so forth. So I want to show you how I would create it. And I would start by creating my own view. That way I have control over how things would be. I'm going to first pull up, this is Microsoft Code Writer, and here's the view, the T-SQL script I created, and you could download the view in this blog post. So the first thing it does is it goes out and it gets my budget numbers. Then it looks at all of my actual summaries for the open year and for the historical year. And once again, you can get this information right from within my post. So what I'm going to do is use Excel to go out and grab the data directly using Query Editor. So I'm going to go to Data, and I'll choose Get Data, and I'm going to choose to get it from a database, and I'll choose SQL Server. Now, if you're on a version older than Excel 2016, you're going to have to use an add-on called Power Query in order to get it, but essentially it'll work the same way. So I'm going to put in the name of my server and the name of my database. And because I have this view out there, now I have the view actually in my SQL Server, but I'm going to just use this T-SQL script here. So I'm going to select all of this T-SQL script and just paste it into the SQL statement. And now I'll go ahead and click on OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at the credentials that are saved within my Excel. If you've never done that before, it's going to prompt you for your credentials. I have full rights. So if you don't have full rights, then you're going to want to make sure that within the SQL database that you have access to the GL00100, the GL00105, the GL10110, the GL10111, and you'll also want to make sure that you have access to GL00201. So this is the account number master. This is where you can actually get the account string itself. This is the budget, this is open year, and this is historical year. So you want to make sure you have access to all of those. It might be easier just to place it in a view in SQL and then just get access to that view. And I don't need to go in and do any kind of editing, but I could if I wanted to. Using the Query Editor, and there's a lot of things you could probably do to make it simpler to run, but I'm going to use it as is. So I have a data source, whether or not it's budget or actual numbers, and it also, I believe the data source also would show if it's open year or history year if it's actual. I have the value, and the value will actually be the budget ID or the word actual, meaning it's our actual GL number. I have the fiscal year, the fiscal period, the account number, the account description, and then there's a field for the budget amount or actual amount. So depending on whether it comes from the budget or the actual, one of these two will be populated. So I'm going to just choose to load this information. But again, you could take the script and rework a lot of it in Query Editor if you're so inclined. All right, so here is my query that I created. I'm going to change this from Query 1 to GL Budget Variance. Keep in mind, this table name cannot have spaces in it. So there's my GL Budget Variance. And now what I'm going to do is choose to summarize this with the pivot table and use that name GL Budget Variance. And once I do that, it'll open it on a new sheet here. So I'm going to just close that query connection. And I'm going to start building out my pivot table that does the comparison for me. So I want to get the account number and the account description. So those are going to populate in my row area. And then I also want to get the actual numbers, and that'll populate in value, as will my budget ID. So now I can see all of that information. And this is the bulk of what I want to do, but I also want to take the fiscal period, and I could either put it above the account number or after the account description. And I'm going to do it after the account description. That way for each account number I could see all of the fiscal period. Now before I do anything else, I want to change this format. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click under Pivot Table Tools. I'll click on Design. I'll go to Report Layout, change it to Tabular. That makes it a little easier to read. Now for every field in my rows, I can see a separate column. And I also want to go to subtotals and remove the subtotals. And then that way, if I want it to subtotal, I could just simply click on like the account name and it's going to subtotal for me. Or I could choose to right mouse click and expand or collapse the entire field. So here I could see the whole year. There's my actual numbers and my budget. So let's do a little bit of cleanup here. So what I'm going to do, and you could either right mouse click down here on values or on these numbers. We're going to choose value field settings, and then we're going to change the name. So I'm going to call this actual, and we'll just take off the word amount. It has to be a unique name from whatever's over here. And if you ever find yourself wanting to use that same name, just put a space after it and that'll make it unique. I do want it to summarize, so I'm going to change it to a number format, and I'm going to make it currency, and if it's negative, I'll make it red, and click OK. In this case, once we do this with budgets, anything that has a credit balance on either side is going to end up red, so keep that in mind. I want to do the same for this piece. So I'm going to come over here and I will choose value field setting. I'm going to change this to just budget. That makes it unique. I'll go to number formatting, I'll choose currency, and I'll make that red. Okay, now we'll click OK. And now I could see my budget and I could see my actual. And if I were to expand any one of these, I could see the individual ones listed right there. So I'm going to just come in here, and I want to now, before I do anything else, I want to create a variance. So to do that, I'll click under Analyze. I'll choose Field and Items. So I'm going to calculate or create a column called Variance, and I'm just putting a little space after that because it's going to say sum of variance, and I just want to be able to use the word variance. So I'll get the actual amount minus, and I'm just double clicking, the budget amount. So that will automatically populate the sum of the variance here. So I'm going to come in and choose value field settings, change this to just variance, and now I could see the variance between any one of these. Now a little bit more of things that I want to do. I want to come in under Pivot Table Tools, Analyze, and I'll choose some slicers. And the slicers that I probably want to choose are data source and value, but I could also get fiscal year and fiscal period if I want to. I'm going to leave those off for right now. And I'm going to put these two slicers right here. A couple things I want to point out. Under data source, I could see just getting budget information, and notice my actuals zero out. Or I could just get historical information, or I could get open. And if I choose history or open, the budget information clears out. So you want to keep that in mind. Likewise, if I choose a budget, the actual numbers will zero out. So I'll always want to choose actual and whatever budget I'm interested in. If you choose fiscal period and you only have one fiscal period budget set up, then it's going to take care of that for you. So that's another cool thing that you might want to do. One more thing I want to do before we prove out our numbers here is there is something that you might want to do. Sometimes Excel will remember the settings from the last time you did a refresh. So just on the pivot table itself, I'm going to right mouse click and choose Pivot Table Options. And on the Pivot Table Options, this is where I could also rename my pivot table. I'm going to go to Data, and I'm going to change the number of items to retain per field from automatic to none, and I'll click OK. And that way, when I refresh, if let's say budget 2016 no longer exists, then I can have that won't appear anymore. Otherwise, it might remember it. All right, so now that we got that done, let's check out our numbers. So here we are in GP 2018. I'm going to go to the financial area, and I'm going to go to budgets. And let me find 2006 budget, which in the 2018 year is actually the 2026 budget. I'm going to open that up into GP here. And let me reselect that. I don't know why it doesn't select automatically. Let's select that first account number. And we will minimize and start comparing our numbers. So we got a lot going on right here. These numbers don't look like they're the same, and that's because we have a lot of budgets selected. So I'm going to just move that out of the way for a moment and select 2006 and 2006 so that I get my budget and actuals. And now you can see my budget does seem to line up. Let's collapse the year and check that out. 144,000, 144,000. So now that we've done that, let's also go back into GP and let's check out the summary information for that account. So I'm going to pull up that account again. This time I'll choose 26, minimize, and my actual number is 457, 156. So as you can see, they're out of balance. Oh, the difference is the year. So let me come back in and put in one more under Analyze, that fiscal year slicer. I should have used that after all. So if I come in here, actually I can just turn that back wide open again, select the year 2026. Oh, before I do that, you notice everything else is dimmed out. One of the things you may want to do, I'm going to select all the slicers, and under Slicer Tool Options, go to Slicer Setting and tell it to hide items with no data. So that way, when I select 2026, those are my only options. Now that I've done that, you can see this actual number here. Let me bring that back. And now I have a match, 365, 014, 82. So I'm actually looking at my live activity for 2026, all the budgets that are available for 2026, and I could choose whether I want to just see open or budget data. That might be something you don't even want to see. So let's just dump off that data source there. There's a lot of things that you could do to kind of make this work in your favor, but in any event, this is looking at live, real data, looking at the summary information in your general ledger, and it's also looking at the budget information. One more thing I want to show you inside of GP, if your summary information ever looks incorrect, all you need to do under the financial series is open up utilities and choose to reconcile and reconcile a year. What this does is it takes all of the summary information and recalculates summary by fiscal period and fiscal year and updates it. You'll notice that once you select history on a year and you choose to reconcile that year, it's going to warn you about history. And the reason why it warns you that, if you were to go into the setup information for the general ledger, so setup, financial setup here, then it needs the account transaction history. So you want to make sure you have accounts and transactions turned on. I even like to keep my budget transactions after I post them. So make sure you have all of those history options turned on before you run reconcile. That way you will not blow away any of your historical years. So, Kara, I hope this helps. Thanks.